Welcome to the Miscellaneous Mind, where nightmares come alive. Dive into the depths of fear with our chilling tales that will keep you on the edge of your seat. From haunted houses and vengeful spirits to unspeakable creatures lurking in the shadows, each story is designed to thrill and terrify. Join us every week as we explore the darkest corners of the human psyche and the supernatural. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell icon for notifications, and prepare for a journey into horror like no other. What lurks in the darkness? Let's find out, if you dare. The wind howled through the dense forest, rattling the windows of the small, isolated cabin deep in the heart of the woods. Sarah stood at the kitchen sink, her hands trembling as she rinsed off the dinner plate, her eyes flicking toward the dark window every few seconds. The house felt unnervingly quiet, the only sound the occasional creak of wood as the cabin settled deeper into the cold earth. Outside, night had fallen like a thick, suffocating blanket, swallowing the world beyond her door. She wasn't supposed to be here alone. This had been a weekend trip for her and her boyfriend, James, a getaway to escape the stress of their hectic lives. But when James had received a last-minute call from work, Sarah insisted she'd be fine on her own for the night. Just one night. Tomorrow morning he'd be back, and they'd hike the trail they'd planned. It was just one night. But as the hours dragged on and the night deepened, Sarah's initial bravado waned. She felt the weight of the silence pressing down on her, heavy and oppressive. Even the forest outside seemed to have gone still, the usual hum of crickets and the rustling of nocturnal animals conspicuously absent. She dried her hands and grabbed her phone from the table, scrolling mindlessly through her messages, hoping for a distraction. The screen dimly lit her face, casting long shadows on the wooden walls. No signal. She sighed. The cabin had been advertised as off the grid, and while that had sounded charming during the planning phase, now it felt like a mistake. A soft thud came from the back of the house. Sarah froze. Her heart pounded in her chest as she strained to listen. Another thud, louder this time. It came from the back door. Her mind raced. It could be a tree branch blown loose by the wind, or maybe an animal. She swallowed hard, trying to calm the rising panic. There was no reason to be afraid. She was safe in the cabin. Nothing could get in. But then she remembered the back door latch had been finicky when they arrived. James had promised to fix it, but he hadn't gotten around to it yet. Another thud, followed by a slow, deliberate creak. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Someone, or something, was trying to open the door. Her eyes darted to the kitchen knife block. She grabbed the largest one, gripping it tightly in her hand as she moved slowly toward the back hallway. Each step felt agonizingly loud in the stillness of the cabin. The hallway was pitch black, the only light coming from the faint glow of the fireplace in the living room behind her. Her hand shook as she flicked on the hallway light. It buzzed to life, casting a dim, flickering glow on the narrow corridor leading to the back door. The door was ajar. The sight sent a surge of adrenaline through her. She took a step back, the knife raised in front of her. "Who's there?" she called, her voice wavering. Silence answered her. She took another step back, her mind screaming at her to run, but her legs felt glued to the floor. Then slowly the door creaked open wider. In the faint light, she could see something standing just outside, a shadow, tall and thin, looming in the doorway. Her breath hitched as the figure stepped forward, into the light. It was a man, but his face was wrong. His skin was pale and tight, his eyes hollow, black pits. His clothes hung loosely from his skeletal frame, covered in dirt and grime, as if he had been crawling through the earth itself. Sarah stumbled backward, her back hitting the wall. The knife trembled in her hand. "Get out!" she screamed, but the man only stared at her, unblinking. Then, in a voice that seemed to echo from the depths of the earth, he whispered, "You shouldn't be here." Sarah's mind raced. This wasn't happening. It couldn't be real. She blinked, hoping the figure would disappear, but he remained. His eyes locked on her, his expression twisted in an unnatural smile. Without thinking, she turned and bolted toward the front door, her heart pounding in her ears. She reached for the doorknob, her fingers fumbling in her panic, but just as she was about to pull it open, a cold hand clamped down on her wrist. She screamed, whipping around to see the man standing impossibly close to her, his grip like ice, his breath rattling in his chest. "You can't leave," he rasped. With a surge of desperation, Sarah wrenched her hand free and shoved the door open. The cold night air hit her like a wave as she stumbled outside, her bare feet hitting the rough gravel path. She didn't stop to look back. She ran, sprinting toward the dense woods that surrounded the cabin. Branches tore at her clothes, whipping against her skin, but she didn't slow down. She could hear footsteps behind her, slow, deliberate, matching her every move. The figure wasn't running, but it was following, relentless in its pursuit. Her lungs burned as she pushed deeper into the woods, the trees closing in around her. The darkness was impenetrable, the path ahead barely visible, but she didn't care. She had to get away. But then, just as suddenly as the chase had begun, the footsteps stopped. Sarah slowed, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She glanced over her shoulder, but there was nothing. No figure, no sound, just the stillness of the night. For a moment she stood there, her heart still pounding, her mind struggling to process what had just happened. Had it been real, or had her mind played a cruel trick on her, driven by the isolation and fear? But as she turned back toward the path, her blood ran cold. Standing in front of her, just inches away, was the figure. His black eyes bored into hers, and that twisted smile stretched wider. "You're not alone," he whispered, and the darkness swallowed her whole. Thanks for joining us for this spine-chilling tale. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more terrifying stories every other day. What story scared you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let us know what you'd like to hear next. Remember, the darkness is always waiting, so keep your lights on and stay tuned for more nightmares.